Alright you guys, well today we have the Beretta M9, and this is probably one of the most iconic handguns of all time, if not one of the most iconic firearms of all time. Chances are, if you look up a picture of a handgun, or if you had a toy gun as a kid, or you see a sign that says no guns allowed, you're going to see the shape of a Beretta 92. And that's in addition to the numerous TV shows, films, cartoons, video games, Japanese animes that have featured this handgun. And of course, famously, this handgun was adopted as the US military sidearm for a number of decades, starting in 1985, hence the military designation of M9. Of course, several law enforcement agencies also adopted the Beretta 92 of some variation, and that's not just here in the States, that is worldwide. Militaries and law enforcement have adopted the M9. So with that said, this gun has a pretty impressive pedigree, and it's not without merit. For a number of years, a lot of people didn't have very good things to say about the Beretta 92. Well, I think most people were just ambivalent towards it, but of the few people that were very outspoken about the Beretta 92, they were not always too kind on it. And I think that just comes with the nature of it being so ubiquitous as to be taken for granted. In the past couple of years though, I think a lot of people have become interested in the Beretta 92 again, and there's been quite a few people out there really innovating and online singing the praises of the Beretta 92. And Beretta themselves has been doing a very good job of facilitating this sort of renaissance of the Beretta 92. They've released tons of new models. You know, you would think ever since the M9 contract ended, they would just forget about this design, move on to a new design, and let this sort of wither away and become discontinued after a while or whatever. But Beretta's actually done the opposite, and they've expanded the line of 92s. They have put more effort into marketing it and putting more aftermarket support out there. And there's also been tons of gunsmiths out there that are willing to work on Berettas. And famously, Wilson Combat and Langdon Tactical, they offer custom gunsmithing work on Berettas. It's seen as the best, but there are tons of armorers and gunsmiths out there who will work on a Beretta 92. And really, most of the armor level tasks you can do yourself. So yeah, the Beretta 92 has experienced sort of a resurgence in popularity. And I think that's because there's a lot of pros to this handgun, and most of the cons are sort of self-evident or immutable characteristics of such a large handgun. So I just want to talk about sort of the cons and pros that apply to all of the Beretta 92 series, not just the standard M9, briefly, before I start talking about the bog standard M9. So pretty much everyone right away notices something about the Beretta 92 is that it looks fantastic. Pretty much everyone loves this handgun, and I think the most iconic feature is going to be that open top slide design. And then the next thing they notice is when they go to rack the slide, that it is just like glass from the factory. Pretty much every Beretta 92 just has an amazingly smooth action. The next thing you'll notice is when they go to shoot it is they say, hey, that double action trigger is actually very, very smooth. A little bit heavy usually from the factory, but very smooth, almost like a nice Smith & Wesson revolver. And then that single action, the single action is also very good. It's definitely better than a lot of budget 1911s and stuff like that out there. Definitely better than a CZ trigger, I'd say. The next thing that people notice about this handgun is when they go to shoot it, is that the recoil is just very, very slight. It's a very manageable gun. Doesn't matter what size shooter you are. I'm not the biggest guy. Doesn't matter how big your hands are. Really, this gun shoots very soft, and that is because of just how big it is, how much weight it has, and the fact that it's shooting a 9mm. And another pro that's universal to the entire 92 series is going to be, of course, great accuracy, but most modern handguns are all more accurate than the shooter anyway. But the Beretta 92 does have the advantage of a very long sight radius. This gun also has a lot of aftermarket support, a lot of holster options out there, a lot of grip options, sights options. Beretta's website actually offers a lot of aftermarket options that are very good. And this gun's been around for a while. There's been a lot of people making accessories for the Beretta 92. And last but not least, this handgun, of course, is eminently reliable. That was proven in the M9 trial. The failure rate of this handgun is incredibly low. I personally never had a malfunction with this handgun under normal operation. And I've only had a malfunction with a Beretta 92 series handgun in general, with a very modified gun with a 8-inch barrel or 7-inch barrel or something with a barrel weight on the front of it. So the little powder puff round I was using couldn't cycle the slide. But yes, these guns are eminently reliable. I don't think it would have been used by so many law enforcement agencies, so many militaries all over the world, by the way, again, not just limited to the US, if they weren't reliable. And the M9 trial, that information is publicly available. If you watch the TFB TV review on the 92X Compact, he actually goes into detail about that trial, and this is a very, very reliable handgun. And reportedly, I believe Paul Harrell has never had a malfunction on his Beretta 92 FS that he's probably owned for decades. So Yeah, everyone that owns one of these handguns will tell you it's a very reliable handgun. Typical complaints of the 92 series are always going to be size. These guns are not small. Even the compacts are not small. And another thing that people complain about in particular is grip size. This handgun does have a fairly large grip, and the M9 of all of them has the largest grip. And for me, this is probably the largest grip I would feel comfortable holding. I'm able to hit all the relevant controls, no problem. But I think any larger, any wider, say if I put the wood grips on here, I think I would have trouble reaching, say, the magazine release or something like that. Of course, with size comes weight, especially with an all-metal gun like this. Metal frame, metal slide, it's gonna weigh a little bit. And I've carried this handgun inside the waistband, outside the waistband, concealed carry, open carry, several hours a day. I've carried it, driving cross country, and it does get in the way sometimes. It does start to wear down on you. And, I carry a J-frame nowadays, and it really makes me appreciate how nice it is to carry a J-frame after carrying one of these for, I probably spent about a year with one of these on my hip at this point, ever since getting my license to carry about 3 years ago. And last but not least, people love to complain about the double action, single action trigger for a number of reasons. I think the number one reason that people complain about it though is that it's a skill issue. They just don't have enough experience with it. They don't have enough familiarity with it, and they haven't trained or practiced with it enough to become comfortable or good at a double action trigger pull, let alone the transition from a double action to a single action and a semi-auto. So I think that's not really a good criticism of the M9, but it is a common complaint. So we've talked about the pros and cons of the Beretta 92 series as a whole, but the subject of this video is this handgun here, the standard Beretta M9 that you can purchase brand new today. And I kind of want to talk about that and why that's special. This handgun is functionally identical to a Beretta M9 that rolled off the line in 1985. And the fact that you can go and purchase one brand new from Beretta like that is, I think, really cool. It's sort of like being able to go down to the Ford dealership and purchase a brand new 1985 F-150 exactly how it was made in 1985. And you could say that analogy doesn't work because, cars have had so many regulations since then. But even in the gun industry, this is sort of rare. Can you go down to Colt and pick up a Colt 1911 A1 just like the one you carried in service back in the day? Can you go down to GM Hydromatic and purchase an M16 A1 like the one you carried back in Vietnam? You cannot do that. So it is really cool that you're actually able to buy essentially an exact replica of the handgun as it came out in 1985. So why would someone purchase one of these outdated 1985 model Berettas when there's a plethora of modern, 92Xs with red dot mounting options and rails and, interchangeable back straps, that sort of thing? Why would you purchase this handgun? Well, just like that classic car analogy, this handgun has style, okay? And it is the classic look of the Beretta 92, and it is a timeless look. All of the new 92s, they compromise the look of this classic Beretta. Of course they have to, because the rail is not classic looking. The straight backstrap is not the classic 92 look, so they look different. They still look good, but if you like the classic Beretta 92 look, just like the one that's in all the movies and all the TV shows, video games, whatever, then you're gonna have to buy the Beretta M9 because it's the classic M9 as it was in 1985 with the straight dust cover and with the humpback without the scallop in the grip. And by the way, the 92 FS, the modern 92 FS, is actually slightly changed as well. The dust cover here is slanted a little bit and there is a scallop on the back here. Additionally, with the new 92 FSs, they come with 3-dot sights instead of 2-dot sights. The marks are totally different on the new 92 FSs as well. All the new 92s, with the exception of the commercial M9, have lawyer text, what I like to call on them. Warning, handgun fires without magazine. Read the owner's manual before use. And if you buy the M9, it does not have that. It has marks that are similar to a military M9, although they are slightly different. Now, as a side note, the commercial M9 does have different markings from the military M9, and it has changed over the years, particularly when they switched from Accokeek, Maryland to Gallatin, Tennessee for their manufacturing. And I'll splice in some footage here showing the differences between the 3 different slides for you so you can see the differences with your own eyes. One's a military slide, one's an old commercial slide, and one's a new commercial slide. I think the other reason why someone would purchase one of these over the newer options is going to be nostalgia. And it's related to style in some aspect, but if you carried one of these in the military or in law enforcement or as a security guard or something, you carried one of these and you're familiar with one of these, you might be nostalgic for it, especially if you really liked it, or even if you didn't like it. You know, it completes a collection of weapons that you used while you were in service, or even if you're just interested in military history. You know, it has some nostalgia value to it because it is the exact same functionally as the military M9s, as the police M9s, and that sort of thing. So nostalgia would be the second reason I think someone would purchase one of these. Now, last but not least, the reason why someone would pick the original M9 over the other 92s out there is going to be price and availability. This handgun is the cheapest MSRP of all of the 92 series. It is the standard M9, but it is every bit just as reliable. Just like all those pros and cons I mentioned earlier, it has all the pros of the Beretta 92 series, and it has the lowest price. So price to performance wise, this is the best deal. Another thing too is availability. Again, everyone and their mother has one of these guns. You can find them in pawn shops, you can find them used, you can find them at estate sales, at auctions, you can find them on forums, and a lot of people are trying to get rid of these standard M9s to trade up to a 92X or an M9A3 or M9A4 or something, so you can get really good deals on these guns. You know, sometimes they're half the price of a brand new M9A4 or M9A3, which are like $900 guns, I think. I personally paid $484 for this handgun, brand new, and that was including shipping, and there was no sales tax. Throw on 20 bucks for a transfer fee. And you know, I will say it was from a law enforcement supply website, and I had to show like a DD214 to purchase it at a discounted price. But even without the discount, you can find these handguns for $550 all day long, $560, sometimes even $500, and then you throw in your shipping and your taxes and stuff like that. But what that allows you to do is purchase this handgun and purchase more ammo, or purchase this handgun and not feel bad about carrying it or beating it up or banging it up. And really the worst thing you can do for a gun is not shoot it. The worst thing you can do for a gun is to carry it on your hip every single day, having it get beat up, having it get neglected, collect with pocket lint, dust, rain, you know, snow, whatever. That is really the worst thing you can do for a gun. And so when I purchased this handgun, it wasn't my first Beretta 92, it's not my favorite Beretta 92, it's not my best Beretta 92, but it is the one that I have the most experience with, the one I've carried the most, the one I've shot the most, just because I bought it so inexpensively and I didn't feel bad about banging it up and carrying it, etc. And with this being the Beretta 92 that I have the most experience with, the lessons that I've learned with this handgun, as far as applying the fundamentals, as far as learning that double action trigger pull, remember the double action trigger pull is really the most skillful, the hardest to master trigger pull of any trigger system out there. And the lessons you learn on a double action trigger can apply to any trigger out there. It doesn't matter if it's a staple gun or if it's a single action, you know, 1911, if it's a double action revolver, if it's a two-stage or one-stage rifle trigger. The lessons you learn on the double action trigger to put that much force and that much movement into the trigger without disturbing the sights, that can be applied to any trigger out there. And that's why I really do recommend people for their first handgun to get something that's standard and to keep it standard, keep it factory. Because if you learn the standard gun, from there you can learn what you like and what you don't like about the gun, what you should change and what you should keep the same. I see a lot of people, they recommend a new gun, and this happens a lot with Beretta 92s. I see it on forums all the time. People will ask, what should I get for my first handgun? And people say, get a Beretta 92X red dot optic and put this sight on it, and go and take it to Langdon Tactical and have them do this work on it, and get the Langdon trigger bar and get this Leighton hammer spring and stuff like that. And I think that is the wrong advice to give a new shooter, wrong advice to give someone who's just getting into handguns. What you should tell them is to pick up the best value handgun, which is going to be your standard handgun of a reliable quality from a reputable manufacturer at the lowest MSRP, so that's this handgun in the Beretta 92 series. Buy as much ammo as the rest of your budget affords and just start putting rounds down range with this and learn what you like and what you don't like, and dry fire a lot. And of course, a double action trigger lends itself very well to constant dry fire practice, because you can sit there and you don't have to constantly recock the slide. Just practice, 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 practice with a standard handgun. And then when you move to a nicer handgun, or you get the work done, or you swap out some parts, you will appreciate it more. And then you won't have the opposite problem, where if you start from a $2,000 custom handgun and you work, and then suddenly someone hands you a standard Beretta 92, you're gonna choke. That 8-pound double action trigger pull that you're used to, that's smooth as glass, is not gonna feel the same as that 14, 15 pound sometimes factory double action trigger pull of a Beretta 92, okay? The reset is gonna throw you off. Even just using the standard sights might throw you off. You know, not being able to get a good grip on it because you're so used to some custom, you know, sticky grip that sticks right in your hand using some kind of tape or something or rubber. So like I said, practicing on that standard configuration gives you the opportunity to learn what you like and what you don't like. And for me, I learned, you know, I bought into some of that marketing stuff too. You see people online saying you need this attachment, you need that attachment. Find out for yourself what you need, okay? I purchased a handgun from Beretta with the G decocker only kit. Guess what I found out? I found out that I prefer the F-type decocker safety because it's just as fast, and I retain the ability to load the gun on safe, and I've never had the thing enable itself in my holster. I've never had any of the issues that people commonly talk about why they need the G decocker kit. I've never ran the slide and accidentally engaged the safety. I've never, ever had any of those issues happen to me. And in my own risk assessment, I think they never will happen. I've manipulated, I've dry fired, I've shot this gun thousands and thousands and thousands of times, never had it happen to me, and I find out I prefer the F-type decocker safety, and especially since the new G decocker kit sticks out so far on the right. But again, that's that sort of learning experience I would not have had if I didn't familiarize myself with the standard first. There are a few other things I found out that I really didn't like too. You know, the plastic trigger is fine from a functionality standpoint, but you know, I found out I prefer the metal trigger. I like the way it rolls in my index finger. And I also found that I preferred the look of the metal guide rod, the look of the metal lanyard loop, the look of the metal mag release. In fact, the feel of the metal mag release is a little bit better too. So I found out, you know, hey, I do actually prefer those upgrades. And so I swapped out everything with metal on this firearm. All the parts that come plastic from the factory, I swapped out with metal. The other thing I found out was the D hammer spring. So for a while I shot this gun with the factory hammer spring, but I noticed that during dry fire practice, where I'm pulling that double action trigger pull, you know, hundreds, thousands of times sometimes if I'm doing it for hours, my index finger would really start to fatigue, and the next day it'd actually be kind of sore. So, because it was, you know, it is like a 15-pound trigger pull from the factory. And after doing that for a while, I was like, you know what? I think I will get the D hammer spring. And I will say, I've noticed no impact on my accuracy, my first shot accuracy when it comes to double action, but I have noticed that it is easier to dry fire. It's a nicer dry fire experience. So that D hammer spring, again, is not super necessary. You can learn and you can become proficient with that factory double action hammer spring because it is only one shot. Remember, your first shot is going to be double action and all subsequent shots will be single action. And another thing too, I noticed actually that when this gun came from the factory, the single action was actually the best that I had felt on pretty much any handgun up to that point. And the best, and it's still the best single action on a Beretta 92. And when I switched to the D hammer spring, it didn't really change the weight of the single action. It's mainly more for the double action. So in that sense, from the factory, the Beretta 92's factory hammer spring is totally usable, okay? I don't, you know, people complain it's way too heavy. It's totally usable. Now, the D hammer spring is a very cheap upgrade, but, you know, find out if you need it or find out if you don't need it. Find out if you like it, find out if you don't like it. So again, starting from the standard helps you appreciate all those upgrades, all those changes you want to make moving forward, if any. Because again, this handgun is basically functionally identical to a bog standard M9. The only change is that hammer spring and a metal part swap. So now, of course, the M9s back in the 80s would have all had metal parts. Some point in the 2000s, I think they swapped the plastic parts. So I just kind of returned it back to its older state. I think this handgun, in its original configuration, definitely goes toe-to-toe with any modern handgun. It's definitely just as accurate, just as reliable as any modern handgun. Now, people say about capacity because, you know, the Beretta 92 still ships with these 15-round magazines. Well, you know, Mechgar makes these 18-round magazines that are flush-fitting to the M9. And it's very nice. In fact, this is how I carry the gun. I strip the top round. I don't even bother loading the one round by hand to get 18 plus 1. I think 17 plus 1 is just fine. There you have it. I mean, that's pretty much the last thing that separates the Beretta M9 from a more modern handgun is capacity. Because they're both semi-automatic handguns. They're both 9mm. They're both extremely accurate, and they're both extremely reliable. So the only thing that really used to separate the M9 from other more modern designs was that 15-round capacity. Well, now with these 18-round magazines that come standard on a lot of 92 variants, it's no longer an issue. And there's also factory Beretta 17-rounders as well. So that's the Beretta 92/M9, the original, the standard configuration. And I think you can purchase this handgun for the style, for the nostalgia, but I think at the end of the day, this handgun still goes toe-to-toe with any modern handgun and is still a viable combat platform, defensive handgun platform that you should master, because if you master this handgun, you can master pretty much any other handgun out there. So thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you liked it. If you didn't like it, you probably didn't watch this far, and see you next time.